Hey, it's Emily, your favorite PodRocket producer. Did you know that LogRocket has a TikTok now? You can catch up on all the interview clips from this show, watch UX tutorials, and get more great content from LogRocket. You can check out the LogRocket TikTok today at log.rocket. See you on TikTok.
Hi there, and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics which surface UX and technical issues impacting your user experiences. So go ahead and start understanding where your users are struggling and try it for free at logrocket.com today. My name is Paul, and joined with me is Steve Ruiz. He is the founder of Tldraw, and we're going to talk about, as it's coined, right, Tldraw's accidental AI play. Got a few questions to go along with that. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Hey, how's it going?
Tldraw has been used by many. I think if you talk to a lot of folks that are in the software engineering world, people have stumbled upon it. They've used it in meetings to describe things. So thank you for the wonderful piece of work that you let out for the world to use. Today, we're going to be going over some basics about what it is, how you're leaning into the AI narrative and driving real value with that. And more importantly, I'm very curious, as somebody who's at the forefront of bridging actual usable things in the trade with AI, what's your temperature read on everything? Because it's really neat to get the inside scoop of somebody who's actually down with boots on the ground and trying things that work and don't work. So excited to get into that. Just to kick things off, could you talk for anybody that hasn't had the opportunity to use Tldraw? What is it, really quick, and what made you set forth to try to make it?
Okay, I'll do my best. It's a surprisingly confusing product, but trust me, it all works. The core thing that we sell at Tldraw, the original idea was an SDK primitive for infinite canvas applications. So you're thinking something like Miro or Figma or any of these applications where you have stuff on the canvas, you can zoom in, zoom out, move it around, track manipulation. And if you wanted to build one of those applications, the canvas itself is very hard. It's a bit like building a text editor. It's very complicated, and most of that complexity is the same between canvases. It's conventional. So it's not the part of the product that you would want to build, because the best you can do is just do the table stakes in a way that feels good and no one really cares, because as long as it's great and perfect, no one will notice. So Tldraw is that primitive for infinite canvas applications. We also had essentially a demo Tldraw, which is tldraw.com. That's how it started. It was like, we have the SDK, we want to show this off, so let's build a whiteboard with it. And that application is quite popular. It's free. It's very low friction. We only added the ability to log in this week. So until now, it has just been an anonymous but multiplayer canvas experience that you could have to whiteboard with your colleagues, friends. And yeah, and then in addition to that project, we also have many other demos that we've built with the SDK to show off its capabilities, but also to pair it with other technologies, especially AI, to show the fact that you could use the two together, but also just explore this entirely unexplored space of direct manipulation canvas, like whiteboard plus AI. And we've had some luck in terms of social media and made some things that people really seem to be excited about. We're certainly excited about it. But yeah, end of the day, it's an SDK that we sell to companies, and then we build stuff with the SDK.
I'm sure anybody listening who's done a sliver of web dev, when they hear infinite canvas editor, people are go, oh crap, like there's a lot that I need to think about that goes into this. Could you give us something that you have stumbled upon that you've had to engineer against to make this possible, that maybe people won't think of off the top of their head that make infinite canvas challenging?
Yeah. I made my own job a lot harder by choosing to render the component, the canvas, using like normal React, like React DOM. So unlike Figma or Miro or Mural or any of the other canvases, whiteboards out there, our canvas is just normal website stuff. It's React components returning DOM elements, right? I use like Notion as an example. Notion looks like a text editor, but it's built with website stuff. And as a result, you can embed entire websites on a Notion page. You can do the same thing with Tldraw. You can put an entire website on the canvas. You can put video. Anything you can do on a website, you can do on the canvas. Getting that to work, getting that to be fast enough and have a high enough ceiling, we had to do some pretty creative stuff with the canvas, both on an API design of how to make that extensible and how to make that customizable by developers and user developer code inside of the canvas, but also like How do you deal with just rendering 4,000 SVGs at the same time at different scales? And some of them are off screen, some of them are on screen, as well as really complex relationships between some of the information in the application. But I'm assuming like a technical audience here for this podcast, but you might have shapes that are parented to other shapes. And so the first shape is transformed and rotated, and then the thing inside of that shape needs to inherit that transformation and that rotation. But it might have its own children and its own transform and its own rotation. So you get these chain of affine transforms, all of which depend on each other. So if one of them changes at the top, all the children need to update as well. That's not something that you can do very easily, very quickly in React, especially. None of the data solutions within the ecosystem are really built for this type of high performance application. So we had to do a lot of that ourselves of developing essentially a signals library with incremental view maintenance, and also tying that into our collaboration system, which we built in-house, because while there are some great options for collaboration, none of them are really great for the canvas, which has its own data requirements. And so a lot of the problems which any application would solve, we also had to solve in a way that could be very, like the entire application data, most of it could change at 60 times a second as people are moving around or resizing shapes. So rendering, inheritance of properties and dependencies, all that stuff, it was just a nightmare. But the good news is that we figured it out and we iterated on it and it works really well. And now I can tell someone like, yeah, if you have an idea with this, if it's a collaborative canvas-based thing, like you could probably knock that out in an afternoon, if not a weekend. And like, that's just never been possible before. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see what folks have built with it.
Long journey to get to a place where it's palpable for others and working, but it's all in React land. It's easily reachable for other people. Quite the feat. And I'm sure I wanted to go into detail a little bit about the complexities that you faced with the base product here, because it's going to give credence to some of the amazing stuff that's happening right now on this. I don't know if we want to call it a pivot or like an extension to Tldraw. And how you guys are moving forward. So what do you call the new feature? Is that what Make Real is, as it's coined?
These are all, sometimes I call them side projects, but they're side projects within Tldraw. They would fall under marketing. At the end of the day, that's what the purpose of these things are, but it's also R&D. Like any good project, we just do what we want and call it whatever we want afterwards. Our investors are all happy, so it's all good. But the Make Real, what happened with Make Real, to compress that story, and there are blog posts, and I've talked about this on a couple of other podcasts as well. Basically, when ChatGPT 4 with Vision came out for developers, that was the first time that there was a developer API used multimodal language model, like a language model that was tied to images as well, that could work with images. And so the application, the first prototype of it was actually not made by us. It was made by a guy named Sawyer Hood, who at the time was working at Figma and had this idea of, what you could do with this is you could draw a user interface and then send it to the language model and say, hey, AI, you are a web developer. Here's the design. Come back with a working prototype. And so he prototyped that in Tldraw. So you draw whatever you wanted, select it, click a button, Make Real. It would send it to the OpenAI and say, hey, you're a Tailwind expert web developer, blah, 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 come back with a working prototype. And it worked like surprisingly well. I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, we could do so much more of that. First off, you could put the website back onto the canvas. So you never really leave the canvas. Like draw, you generate the websites there because our canvas is made of web. And then we also learned that you could, if you drew on top of it, on top of the website that it gave back, because this is a working interactive website. But if you drew on top of it, you could do that whole prompt thing again using the screenshot of the website with the annotations on top of it, and then ask the model essentially, hey, your designers had notes, like great work, but could you update it in order to reflect the annotations or the markup that the designers added? And so you ask for a form, it gives it to you, and then you cross out one of the headings and you draw an arrow that says, hey, make this thing green, or just write the word better, or draw it in handwriting, whatever, and send it back. And just say, you can imagine communicating with a contractor or something for some reason by annotating screenshots. It would just come back with that improvement and that iteration. And then you could repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And it actually felt, and it is like a workflow. It's like a way of programming via this sort of turn-based drawing annotation. Here's more context. Oh, here's 5 screenshots of websites that I want you to base this on. Just what, I mean, the canvas just can take any content, text, screenshots, whatever, and you're just dumping context in there, visual context, and it works with it really well. And that went extremely viral in November 23. It was just the first time that a lot of people were able to use this new technology in a way that, like, other than, okay, what shoes are these, or something like trivial. Like, this was the first, for a lot of people, for myself as well, this was like the first time it felt like an entirely new type of workflow was in front of us that was based on multimodal AI. And that was like super exciting. It's still there. It was very difficult to you can use it at makereal.tldraw.com. It requires you to enter your API key, which is not a great user experience because you need a developer API key, and that most people like maybe for this audience it's fine, but yeah, I think there like 1 million people tried it and 200,000 like were able to do it or something like that. So it was not end user friendly, but it did mean that on social media the replies were like, we had millions and millions of views on X and other platforms, but the replies were like, hey, how does this work? This is broken. I don't understand this. And then the fifth reply would be like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And then that would repeat all the way down. And yeah, it was a complete chaos, but incredibly fun.
Thinking up the line of the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and then you having that reaction of the first real, wow, it's doing work. You said AI products or outputs could be bad, but amazing. Does this summarize how you feel about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
The context where I talk about that is mostly with the vision models because they're amazing. They're really good. They're great at creating websites and everything as well. But they're also often like bad. I think we're definitely in a moment where there's like a common kind of benchmark where you ask a language model, hey, give me an SVG image of a unicorn. I don't know if you've seen this one, but they're not very good at drawing unicorns. And they're getting better, but also it's hilarious to look at and be like, what? It looks nothing like where did you get that information anyway? And we had done a lot of work around teaching the language model to essentially like collaborate with you on the canvas. So one of the experiments that led to a project called teach.tldraw.com, it started as autocomplete. Like, I'm drawing, I want to keep drawing. Do whatever you think I'm going to do next. Predict my next action. And in order to do this, we had to send a screenshot, but we also had to send a representation, text-based representation of what was on the canvas. Here's what I'm building. Here's what it looks like. Here's some data. And we would ask the language model to send back essentially like events, like an event stream back. So maybe their action was, okay, the next 10 actions are going to be create a rectangle shape and add some text and make it red or blue or something like that, or delete some shapes or move them from here to here. And then we would essentially execute those actions rather than just merge them, but we would execute them and then suddenly there's autocomplete. And it was not good, but it was insanely like cool. It was like still some of the most really unsettling, but in a pleasant way, experiences with AI that I've had have been like, yeah, just navigating the latent space of the model using autocomplete as like the vehicle for that. And we eventually turned that into, because we wanted to ship something, we wanted to be able to show this off. And the autocomplete was a little bit too unpredictable. And it really wasn't clear how you would use it anyway. You just have a blank canvas and then you start drawing and then some things appear. But instead, we went with something called teach.tldraw.com, where it's very openly, hey, we want to gather training data related to help us teach this thing to draw. And you can ask it, essentially you draw a box on the canvas and just write in a text prompt, whatever, draw me a Batman, draw me a unicorn, draw me a flow chart representing a boxing match or something like that. And it would create those things not as an image, but as normal draw shapes. So it would be shapes that you could then manipulate as well on the canvas as if you had drawn them yourself. And in fact, if you did draw something yourself, it could work with that too. One of my favorite things to do with this app is to draw a bunch of like random squiggles and then give it the prompt of saying, oh, hey, my drawing fell apart. Could you put it back together? It used to be a drawing of an owl. And it would reliably try to move the squiggles into a shape that looks like an owl. It'll take a shot at it. Or, hey, there's my drawing of a face fell apart. Could you put all the pieces back together? And it'll try. Or, hey, here's a flowchart of my sales process. Could you improve it? And it would add nodes and move arrows around and do things like that. Free, by the way, to try, teach.tldraw.com. And that is firmly in the bad but amazing category. It is capable.
Well, you put into it, right? And like one thing I think is really cool is you can jump in and you can dial in the output so that then when it goes back in, it's not just down the AI slop trajectory. you're inserting that human uniqueness each step of the way. And that feels like it's a common theme in these AI products coming out. Like that's one thing that got V0 like getting some more traction because you could iterate on it. The one frustrating thing for a lot of people though is that granularity of, hey, there's a line and I want to move the line. That can be a little bit challenging to do in that format. So I can totally see how this is bad but amazing because you're speaking to it as you're iterating at that fine level. Another question I had is you mentioned plan and it executing on, and these are all agentic sort of words that we're using. So under the hood, I assume there's some chain of agents, LLMs calling LLMs. Could you give us any insight into how you guys are approaching that?
So for that project, for Make Real, it's just a prompt and response. For Teach, actually, it is at the moment just a prompt and response. I think if we wanted to improve it, then we would want to chain together a couple of faster and slower models and be like window or patching in some of the system prompts with examples. And there's a whole bunch of tricks for squeezing more out of just that one back and forth or using a chain of models or chain of prompts. But yeah, it's just at the moment, it's just like a one and done. Cross your fingers. Hope to get something back good from Claude. We have done something more recently that is, I would say, more agentic. I don't know if you saw this, the Tldraw computer. This is the most recent one that we did in December, is where we released it. This is like it's a project we did in collaboration with Google DeepMind. So we had a little bit of early access to the new Gemini stuff. Gemini being a very fast multimodal structured output model and a combination of like huge context window, structured outputs, and multimodal is really great for that type of like quick passing around of data between agents. So Tldraw Computer it's like an app where you build essentially workflows. Here's some text. Use this text to generate a poem. Use the poem to generate an image. Use the image to generate a whatever you want all the way across. But when we were building this thing, we realized you could use it like a computer. Like it felt very much like visual programming, but in a way that was super unstructured because of the way that language models work. We were basically executing each one of these things using a language model. So you could do things like 2 plus octopus and get 10 back because it would infer a number from octopus and the closest thing that it had was 8. Or how long would it take me to, I don't know, walk this length, and then a picture of a map with a line through it. And using this kind of like really sloppy, unstructured node graph, essentially, with calls on every node, building cycles and flows that way. It turned out it worked, and it was also, again, like insanely fun. And that got a lot of attention towards, we launched it and then we all went on holiday. So I was spending some of my holiday debugging and unblocking stuff for users, but it was really fun. Tldraw Computer. Yeah. If you haven't tried it, definitely try it. It's by far the most accessible, best documented. There's like examples and introduction and stuff like that. It's not just the empty canvas, which is a first for us. And yeah, again, it's free. I have tons and tons of Google Cloud credits or whatever that I'm burning through. But that's the partnership.
After having done 2 explorations or features that relate to prompt and response using vision models, and after the thing we just discussed briefly, which is the more agentic powered visual computer, if we want to call it, what's your takeaway on the progression of one-shot model responses and the hype that's being stewed right now around building these, people will call them neural architectures?
Ooh, I like
if we want to use that term.
I guess we do. I don't know. My background is as a product designer and prototyping designer. The part of the problem that most interests me is the user experience of what does it feel like I'm doing with this thing? The design principle with computer, for example, was I should feel like I'm using a computer that works the way that I thought computers worked before I knew how computers worked. Like I should be able to just throw information at it and it would just throw information back. No clashes of types or formats or anything. It just come back with an answer. Natural language being the communication medium. I think the way that you achieve that, or any other type of experience, like I should feel like I have a personal assistant, even though I don't. I should feel like I'm collaborating with someone on the canvas, or I should feel like I'm having a conversation. I think whatever you do to achieve that, as long as you can keep up the magic of it, which often comes down to just raw speed. As long as the response comes back fast enough that it feels like someone just thought about it and then replied rather than like you posted a letter, then you can do quite a lot. I think the places where it starts to get complicated are where, as a maker, as a product designer, developer, I suppose the line between what can I do on the user's behalf versus where do I need the user's input. If there is a human in the loop, if there is a stage where I reach back out to you and ask for a follow-up question or ask for confirmation or something like that, how to know exactly when to do that and when not to. I think that's going to be one of the bigger, if I'm understanding the question correctly, which I probably am not, I think that's the part which I find the most challenging when thinking about these kind of more complex agent systems.
I think it does answer the question. And you might have brought up, I don't know if this answers the question, because immediately you said, I'm not thinking about it in terms of what's the output of a one shot versus the output of an agentic neural architecture, if we want to use that word. You're saying, I'm thinking about this from the user experience. What do they feel like they're doing with the model? How do they feel like they're being enabled? And just the fact that we pivoted our conversation at the beginning of the answer for this question in this manner, I think sheds a lot of light on, is AI about the end output or is it about enabling us? And in this light, it would be about me brainstorming with myself, getting closer to that, hey, this is something I want to run with. It's enabling me to start, which in my experience, that is typically the role that AI has played. And it feels very similar here. It's just now it's in a much more palpable visual format that a lot more people can access.
Yeah. I think the thing about creative tools in particular, I was just having this conversation earlier today, which is maybe a little different than programming tools, but a good IDE supports and a good workflow supports like low-cost iteration, low-cost experimentation. I can always just stash my changes and then make some things and throw those away and go back and forth. I shouldn't feel like anything that I'm doing is like permanently destructive, and that gives me the safety in order to try things out. And I think the canvas as like a design space or a creative space, and it lends itself to that because it supports branching, it supports like copying and pasting and just working on the pasted thing. If you're a Figma user, like the option drag to just clone whatever you have selected is probably like the most used feature in that, because it just is part of the rapid iteration, non-destructive workflow, whatever. And I think the role of AI as an assistant within creative tools is tough, right? Because like you said, it's a little bit getting started. It's a little bit making changes like, hey, what would this look like if we switch to this other library for our whatever? How would that change this API service or something? And if you're able to do that trivially, if I'm like using Supabase and I'm like, I wonder what this would look like if instead of Supabase I was using, I don't know, Firebase or something. Like what actually would change in our app if we decided to go in that direction? I'm not going to do that. But that's the type of thing that if it was trivial, I think would drive a lot more decision making, especially early on, to make those types of changes, to pick a different color, to look at things from different angles. I'm really interested in that capability.
Yeah, it's just less friction to move around.
Yeah. Of zero cost, broad, huge changes that you can just throw away and try again, or we've never had that before. So I have a feeling that's going to matter a lot. It would be hard to walk back from.
And it's totally up the vein of enabling you as the master of the work here to experiment, try, and do different things. Steve, we're running up on time here, so I'm going to shoot some fast questions at you. Right before we hopped on our podcast, we were like, yeah, we're going to do a quick round. So here's the quick round. And let's see if we can bottle up these answers into one or two sentences, and we'll shoot them at our listeners rapid fire. So the first one, what is one thing that you made with Tldraw that you personally really liked?
It's hard because I made all of the things that we talked about are some of my favorites. Probably we had a hackathon. I made a floor plan tool with Tldraw that used kind of merged collisions of boxes. You would just draw rectangles and it would automatically figure out where the overlaps are and the lengths of all the different walls and stuff. And you were able to do these like really complex floor plans just by drawing rectangles that overlapped. Hard to describe, but it was pretty incredible. And I've always wanted to go back to that as an application because I'm like, yeah, that's the easiest way that I've ever had to map out like a space.
It sounds ergonomic. Like I want this box, smush them together, figure out the perimeter.
Yeah, it's better than it even sounds. I'll try and send you a link. That's pretty fun.
I'm still waiting for the DIY masters click and drag, build a floor plan, throw some 12.2 Romex in there, just have it snap to the edges, have my plumbing snap it. That'd be really cool.
It would be. Yeah, we need to get some like game developers to build us a
Right?
floor planning app.
It's perfect for game dev. It is made for it. All right, next question. What's your hottest take in AI in design and development? I know during our conversation, we talked about, okay, so you've been on agents, one-shots. Where do you feel like it's impactful? I would like to maybe focus on something that you've taken away, you've realized that perhaps other people might not inherently agree with AI as a whole, or it could be something specific that your team has worked on.
My hot take is that if you are a young developer who is leaning really heavily on these tools, that might not help you as much as you think once you go out into the industry. That the skills that are going to be really valuable in this, I think, inevitably shrinking labor market for computer software engineering, the skills that are going to be really essential, how do I say that? The skills that are going to be really essential are a little bit lower level and a little bit harder, rather than look at this cool thing that I made, which breaks my heart a little bit as someone who loves to make cool stuff and demo. But I think if you're really chasing a career here, especially for the younger software developers, go deep. That's what I'd say.
Love that one. Okay, last question here for our quick round. What's one feature you'd love to build into Tldraw that you haven't had the chance yet? And it does not necessarily need to be AI related whatsoever.
Okay, so Tldraw, just like every other collaboration tool on the canvas, uses cursors to represent, you see each other's cursors. I may have just been playing too much like Nintendo Switch or something, but I think that paradigm could be so much more fun. We've sketched out interactions between collaborators, like where, for example, like your cursor can't move beyond a certain distance from someone else's cursor, and you'd pull each other around like you were tied together with ropes. And every time that we've talked about this, it's, oh my God, there's so many fun ways to creatively constrain someone's experience in that way as like a mini game inside of Tldraw. I want to try it. I haven't tried it. Someday I will. And keep an eye out because I have a feeling that it'll be a lot of fun.
Steve, thank you for your quick questions to our quick round. I've never heard about that potential thing for a live collaboration, so that would be really cool if you guys can. That's just never been seen before for a live sort of like canvas thing. That'd be neat.
Yeah, it's largely unexplored feature, the canvas. So hopefully we're doing our part to make it a little bit more accessible.
We're at the end of our podcast here. If people wanted to keep up to date with you, do you blog?
I do have a blog. It's at steveruiz.me, although I don't post there that often. I post a lot on Twitter and these days Blue Sky. So my username across all of those things is Steve Ruiz OK. And you can, of course, follow Tldraw at Tldraw, Tldraw. The best place to catch us is actually on our Discord. We have an unusually active and a pretty helpful Discord, especially for developer users. And yeah, try out Tldraw.com or any of the side projects that I mentioned. Probably most recently, computer.tldraw.com or Tldraw.computer also works. And yeah, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear ideas. We're pretty early with all this stuff.
The Canvas Masters. Yeah. All right, Steve, thank you so much for your time and for coming on. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon in the future to see where you guys are at with AI.
Take care.